So, with early National Signing Day right around the corner, it's no surprise that we're seeing some of college football's most coveted prospects make their collegiate decision. And today, we need to stop in Austin, Texas, where the Texas Longhorns got a huge win for the number one inside linebacker in the nation, Anthony Hill, out of Denton Ryan, Texas. Today, we need to break this down. We need to talk about what a big win this is for the Texas Longhorns, but then we also need to take a look at this Texas recruiting class because this is a really solid recruiting class, one we need to talk about. Before we can, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Are you surprised that Texas lands Anthony Hill? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions may seem small, but they truly are massive to content creators such as myself, and both getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And this is a huge win for the Texas Longhorns, and this recruiting class as a whole for Texas is really strong. And I don't have to tell Texas fans, one thing you all undoubtedly hear is, yes, but you always recruit well. What has it done for the on-field results? And we're going to get into that, but before we can go about breaking all of that down, let's start with who Anthony Hill is. And Anthony Hill is a top 5 player in the state of Texas, the number 1 inside linebacker in all of high school football, and a top 25 player in the nation regardless of position. He played at Denton Ryan High School, and Texas is no stranger to Denton Ryan High School. Jatavian Sanders also played for Ryan High School. It is a really solid high school as well, typically in the national rankings and typically a powerhouse in the state of Texas, so he's no stranger to high-quality football, as that's what Ryan faces week in, week out. But specifically for the Texas Longhorns, I talked about this a while ago, and I'd actually asked so many of you, and so many of you went down to the comments and echoed my sentiments that inside linebacker was probably the biggest position of need in this recruiting class, and what a better way to address what so many of you and I believed to be your biggest position of need than with the number 1 guy in all of high school football, Anthony Hill. Not only do you get the number 1 inside linebacker, you get to keep the number 1 inside linebacker home, and the cherry on top is you get to flip him from Texas A&M. Now, I know that there was a long time that passed between when Anthony Hill decommitted from Texas A&M and ultimately when he committed to Texas, but inevitably, that was a battle that we were watching for quite some time. Who's ultimately going to end up with the very talented linebacker? Is it going to be Texas, or is it going to be Texas A&M? And as Anthony Hill was a one-time commit to Texas A&M before decommitting, taking some time, and then inevitably ending up in the Texas Longhorns class, I know that has to be sweet for Longhorn fans, knowing that you get a huge need, the number 1 guy in the nation at a position of need that's from your state, and you got to keep him away from Texas A&M. This is about as sweet of a recruiting win as you could have had. And this came in a day where you had just experienced a recruiting loss for another kid that was a top prospect in the state of Texas, Javian Toviano, who ended up heading to LSU. And look, first and foremost, Toviano is a defensive back. I understand Corey Raymond may not be at LSU anymore. I understand that a lot has changed at LSU. Aranda is no longer there anymore. But I'm never surprised when I see defensive backs still go to LSU, and we have to be very honest. Outside of the Texas A&M game this year, LSU was a much better team than so many people across college football could have anticipated, and they did that without one of the best players on their team, Mason Smith, being active. So I'm really interested to see what the future of LSU holds. But even if you missed out on Toviano, you got to double down and get a major win for Anthony Hill. So it was a great day in terms of what this meant for Texas recruiting. But now let's kind of focus on this class as a whole. Because one thing, anytime I talk about Texas recruiting, I get it in the comments. People say, yes, but Texas always recruits well, and it doesn't translate to on-field results. And the one thing I constantly have to keep reminding people is Texas never really recruited with cohesion, in my opinion. What I mean when I say that is Texas might have a class with 4 or 5 stars, and they all might be wide receivers, and they might take 1 offensive lineman. I'm not saying they ever had a class like that. I'm just giving you an example that is fairly analogous to what Texas would do. They'd take all these skill position guys, they'd take 1 offensive lineman, and then halfway through the year, they'd be shocked whenever their quarterback couldn't stand upright. Texas really didn't recruit the offensive line at a sufficient level for years, and that's something Steve Sarkisian and this staff has really changed. Look at the offensive line Steve Sarkisian inherited, and then look at the offensive line they had this year. massive strides were made, and that was one recruiting class. Now imagine what they're going to do with another year in the system, with another year of development. We have to pay attention to these sorts of things. So Texas is now recruiting with cohesion, but not only are they recruiting with cohesion, the rankings and the results haven't fallen off any. What I mean is they're still a top 10 class with Steve Sarkisian, but now they're recruiting with cohesion. And if you're a Texas Longhorns doubter, this is what it's going to take for them to get back on the right track. And I'm certainly not contending that it's going to happen tomorrow or even in 2023. This is going to be a big turnaround that Steve Sarkisian faces. This is why I constantly preach to Texas fans and anybody who will listen, you have got to have patience with Steve Sarkisian. Look at the results you've already seen, though. You've seen your recruiting take a complete 180, where now you're addressing the offensive line and doing it so well. You had a need at inside linebacker. Guess what? You pull the number one inside linebacker in the nation, keeping him in your state away from Texas A&M and teams like the Alabama Crimson Tide, who definitely wanted Anthony Hill. That's a huge win. And if we really want to talk about defense, how about PK and Gary Patterson's defense this year, which really took some strides? Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying they're a complete defense. They still have got a lot to work on. But coming from where they were, what we can say about this Texas team, there are areas where they are undoubtedly getting better, but it's all about tying it all together. And that's why this next season is going to be so interesting for Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns. What strides are you able to make? What strides are we able to see after a few years, after some development, and after a continuation of really solid recruiting classes? But if we're just taking a macro look at this recruiting class for the Texas Longhorns, they have the number one quarterback in the nation per 24/7 Sports Composite, Arch Manning. They have the number one running back in the nation per 24/7 Sports Composite, Cedric Baxter Jr., and they have the number one inside linebacker in the nation per 24/7 Sports Composite, Anthony Hill, plus a five-star wide receiver in Jonte Cook. This Texas class is looking really solid. This is one that I'm really interested to see how these guys translate once they get on campus. I know that Texas fans would love to land Akana, although the crystal balls seem to indicate that Oklahoma's in a really good position for that one. That's a battle Texas would love to come out with, but it's going to be really interesting to see if Oklahoma lands that, because it would almost be revenge for Texas flipping Colton Vasek. Basically, recruiting is about as fun as it can be right now, and I'm super interested to see the results that it yields. Because if Texas is recruiting with this cohesion, if they're actually developing the guys they have, we need to watch what the possibilities for the Texas Longhorns could be moving forward, and I'm super interested to see. But I'm more interested in hearing from all of you. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking. Let me know where you think Texas ends up, because they are a top 5 recruiting class in the nation, and this is a really, really good class. I think they could easily end up in top 5. Let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.